You're about to learn how to make your own yogurt at home from scratch, super simple, full of wonderful probiotics. All right, to make your own yogurt, you need the main ingredient, milk. Of course, there are non-dairy versions here, but today I'm going to focus on dairy, which I know is not ideal for everyone. However, if you can get a good quality source of dairy and you can ferment it, as we're going to do so in the case of the yogurt here, that's where it becomes beneficial, a lot more digestible and utilizable than just straight up milk. Now, here in Canada, raw milk is illegal, so if you're going to be buying it from the store, you're going to find the best that you can. Look for something that's local, that's organic, that hasn't been homogenized. That's one of the issues around dairy, not only with how our cows are raised, what they're fed, all that kind of stuff. We want to look for non-homogenized, again, local, organic, grass-fed, as well as ideal. Now, if you do have raw milk that you're buying, some secret back alleyway pickup, great, wonderful, you can use that. Or again, just choose the best that you have access to at the store. Whether it's raw or pasteurized from the store, you do actually need to heat it. It'll give you a better result, a better consistency. Because what we're going to do is we're going to be adding bacteria to the milk that will culture and ferment it into yogurt. And if you're dealing with a raw milk, it's already got its own bacteria in it. And we actually want to get rid of that bacteria. And I know, I had to get my head around this. Like, what? But I'm just raw milk. I want to keep the bacteria. I want to keep the enzymes. And don't worry, they will come back through the action of fermentation. But just imagine if you had your raw milk and you just let it sit out on the counter. It has its own natural bacteria that what they'll do as they grow and they begin to proliferate, they'll naturally clabber or sour the milk. So that's the action of those bacteria. They're not going to turn it into yogurt. So when we're adding our yogurt starter or the culture that contains the bacteria that will turn this milk into yogurt, if there's already those other bacteria, they're going to kind of compete. So in that sense, we're going to take our raw milk and we're going to heat it, and we're essentially going to do our own little pasteurization. It's a home version where you just heat it up to just under a boil or 180 degrees, and that essentially, kind of cleans the slate. Then you're going to add in your yogurt bacteria, and that will give you your desired result. If you're buying a store-bought milk, you still want to heat it as well. Actually, you'll get a better consistency and a better texture when you heat it. Even though it's been pasteurized at the store, this almost boiling point that you bring the milk to does change the end result, and you'll get a better consistency, a little bit more thicker of a yogurt. So, you get a pot, you got your milk, pour that in, and the first step here is we just want to bring that to almost a boil. You can have a thermometer out and you can measure it. I turn the stove on to, maybe a medium to high range, and then just stand over it and stir it until you get it up to that temperature range. You don't want to walk away and could, risk boiling over, when it could also risk burning on the bottom. So hence that kind of medium to high heat, and keep stirring it, bring it to that temperature. And then we actually, once it's brought there, then we want to let it sit and cool. So raise the temperature up and then let it cool. And ideally we want it at 110 to 115. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to turn this on. We're going to bring it up to temperature, and then we'll be right back and show you the next steps. All right, here we are. We've got this cooling now. So I'm just taking a temperature reading. It went up to just about that 180 to an almost boil. I was stirring it the whole time, and now it's come back down an hour or two later, and it's under 120. So the ideal temperature that we want to start making our yogurt at is between 110 and 115. It can be a little higher, a little bit lower, but another way to test that, if you don't have a thermometer, is just dropping your finger in there. It should feel warm to the touch, not hot. If it's hot and you can't have your finger in there, that is too hot, too warm. But just nice, gentle temperature. It's warm. I can feel that. So that's perfect. We are working with bacteria that we call thermophilic. Now what this means, that thermo means heat, Philic meaning philos, meaning heat-loving. So this is actually bacteria that we need to incubate, have at a warm temperature for it to grow and to thrive. Contrast that with what we call a mesophilic culture, which is something like milk kefir or kombucha. There's many different types of ferments out there. Some are thermophilic in the case of yogurt. Some are mesophilic. Mesophilic, just room temperature. You know, you can take your kefir culture, put it into fresh milk, let it sit out on the counter. Next day, you're going to have milk kefir. Whereas with yogurt, we do need to incubate it at a warmer temperature than just room temperature. And I remember my dad back in the day when I was growing up, he would make his own yogurt, and he had that little kind of incubator set up. He'd pour in the fresh milk, and he'd add his starter, and then it would hold it at a nice warm temperature. So in order for us to recreate that, I mean, if you do have the yogurt incubator, awesome, wonderful. If not, what I do is I have an Excalibur dehydrator, or any kind of dehydrator will work if it has that temperature control on it. So I'm making everything here in the pot. I can add my culture, and then I'll put it in the dehydrator and set it between 110, 115, and overnight, 8 to 12 hours is the length of time where that yogurt will begin to, the milk will culture and create our yogurt. So other ways you can do it, if you have a stove that's gas, maybe you got a pilot light. The milk itself, you've let it almost that boil, bring it down to 110, 115. So it is still quite warm, so I could wrap it with a towel, stick it into the oven just right under that pilot light. That may hold that temperature in that right range. Or if your oven can go to a really, really low, maybe you can turn it on to 100. Just depends on your oven. So have a look at that. Other methods I've heard folks have using, again, wrapping it in a towel and then maybe putting it in, a camping cooler. And you can put it in there, and that should hold the temperature overnight. Give it that nice warm incubation. You could even drop in a hot water bottle or two. I know friends of mine have put it, down in the furnace room on top of the hot water heater, wherever you can create that nice warm environment for those cultures to incubate. Again, thermophilic. So we're ready to now add the culture, and you might be wondering, where do you get it? Well, a couple of different options here. Of course, online and at the Light Cellar, you can find, we regularly carry yogurt cultures. This one here is described as traditional flavor. You can get different ones from different cultures. There's a Finnish one that's called Viili. There's the Bulgarian ones, different, bacterias that will essentially create your yogurt. This one's kind of more just straight up your classic. I'm sure you've heard of some of these names, these lactic acid bacteria like Thermophilus or Bulgaricus, Acidophilus, Bifidobacterium. These are some of the different types of bacteria that once added to that warm, fresh milk, they will create our yogurt. So you can order online or visit the Light Cellar. We very often have these cultures in stock. If not, the other ways, and especially I really encourage you, once you get it going, you really just need to save some from a previous batch, and then that becomes your starter. So I've got 4 liters of milk here ready to turn into yogurt. Once that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out a cup immediately once it's finished, hold that aside, make sure I don't consume it all, and then that becomes my starter for the next batch. So I've got 1 cup for my 4 liters of fresh yogurt that I'm making. So that's my starter. That's how I'm going to get those good bacteria into the fresh milk, and overnight in that warm environment, they're going to digest the milk sugars and turn this into yogurt. So that's a great way to do it. And obviously you need to start somewhere if you don't have yogurt. So it's either a yogurt starter culture, or maybe a friend of yours is making yogurt. You can ask them for a cup to get yours going. Or go to the store, pick up a plain, unflavored, living culture yogurt. Again, as you would be choosing your milk, non-homogenized, living culture, local, grass-fed, all that good stuff if you can find it, to start your yogurt. And then take a little scoop from that into the fresh milk, and that will create your yogurt. A couple other variations here. If you like a thick yogurt, more kind of that Greek style. You'll often see in a lot of yogurts, they'll add, a milk powder or sometimes even a gelatin. So I wanted to share with you a few variations that I do. A lot of the yogurts have like a skim milk powder. You don't really know the quality. So we've got the grass-fed whey. That you can add to increase the protein content, but as well give you a thicker yogurt. So you can just add that right into the milk at this stage before it cultures, before it ferments, and your end result will be a much thicker yogurt. Another one you can use is actually gelatin. So you put in a scoop of gelatin, and again, that will increase the protein content as well as give you a much thicker yogurt. Absolutely, you can just do plain as is, or if you want to thicken it up. So you can thicken it and as well as flavor it either before fermentation or after. The thickening I like to do before fermentation. So what I'm going to do here is just take some of this milk that's been heated and put that in the blender with some of the whey protein, the gelatin, or you can even use colostrum. So colostrum is fantastic for its benefits, and that can be added into your yogurt as well. So for today, maybe I'll do a little bit of both to show you how it can be done. So we've got the whey protein. Up to you how much you want to add. Notice that even though I've got 4 liters here, I don't have to blend it all in. I can just take a portion of that milk and add in my other ingredients, the gelatin and the whey powder to thicken it, and then I'll be adding it all back in together. All right, just a quick little blend here. That gets that all mixed together. And pour that back into the total batch. If you want to add a little bit of vanilla, go for it at this stage. I like to keep mine plain because who knows how I'll like to eat it. And now we add in our starter culture. And just going to put a lid on there and then put it into the dehydrator. And generally, for whatever reason, I sometimes end up making the yogurt in the evening or the afternoon. So for me, it's an overnight, minimum 6 hours. But generally, for me, it ends up being about 8 to 12 that it's in that incubation phase, where I keep it warm between 110 and 115. Once that time period is done, you take it out, you pop it into the fridge, and that will then set it. And you've got wonderful probiotic-rich yogurt. And of course, if you've added any other extra ingredients, it'll have a nice, thicker consistency. But otherwise, you can have fun, you can play with this, come up with your own variations, and enjoy.